In the dust of a small South African village called Mvezo, in the summer of 1918, a child was born, a boy who would one day change the very rhythm of his nation's heartbeat. His name was Rolihlahla Mandela, a Xhosa word that means troublemaker. No one knew then that this troublemaker would trouble the conscience of the world. He was born under the rule of segregation, a land where the color of one's skin decided the worth of one's life. His father, Godla Henry Mpakanyiswa, was a respected chief, a man of pride and principle. But fate has a strange way of shaping legends. His father lost his position after defying the colonial authorities. And so Mandela's first lesson came early, that standing for truth always comes with a cost. After his father's death, the young boy was sent to live in the royal court of Chief Jongintaba Dalinyebo, a powerful leader among the Tembu people. There, surrounded by elders and warriors, Mandela learned about leadership, not through power, but through listening. He often sat in silence as the elders debated, resolving conflicts not with fists, but with words. That silence shaped him. Years later, Mandela would recall, "It was in that court that I understood what democracy could mean, a place where every man's voice carried weight." But at that time, he was still a boy, curious, restless, watching the world with quiet fire in his eyes. When he went to Clarkberry Boarding Institute, he saw a new kind of world, Western uniforms, British manners, and an education that subtly taught him to be accepted, you must forget who you are. Yet Mandela never forgot. He wore the uniform, but beneath it beat the heart of an African son, proud, questioning, unbroken. He excelled in his studies and earned a place at Heldtown, a Methodist college where discipline was sacred. Here, he first read about freedom, the French Revolution, the American Civil War, and stories of men who defied empires. Each page whispered to him, change is possible. Each story planted a seed that one day would grow into rebellion. By the time he reached Fort Hare University, he was no longer the silent boy from Mvezo. He had become a young man who could not stay silent anymore. At Fort Hare, he studied law, debated fiercely, and challenged authority. When the university administration demanded obedience, Mandela joined a student protest, the first of many battles to come. He was expelled for refusing to apologize. That night, as he walked away from the campus, under a moonlit sky, he wasn't angry, he was awakened. He understood that real education begins the moment you start saying no to injustice. But rebellion is rarely welcomed. When Chief Jongintaba heard of Mandela's defiance, he was furious. He arranged a marriage for the young man, hoping to tie him down, to make him obedient again. But Mandela had tasted the flavor of freedom. And once you've tasted it, you can never go back. So he ran away, a fugitive, not from the law, but from the destiny others wrote for him. He took a train to Johannesburg, hiding under shadows, carrying nothing but determination and a name that meant troublemaker. Johannesburg, a city of gold, greed, and ghosts. Here, black men worked in mines that glittered for others, while their own lives turned to dust. Mandela saw with his own eyes the injustice of apartheid, how a system could legally crush a human being's soul. He found work as a night watchman, then as a clerk, before joining a law firm as an apprentice. He walked miles every day, not just across streets, but across the thin line between survival and purpose. It was here he met Walter Sisulu, a man who would become his lifelong friend and comrade. Sisulu saw in him what few did, not just intelligence, but the courage to transform pain into power. And it was Sisulu who first whispered the word that would define Mandela's life: resistance. By now, he was no longer just a young man finding his path. He was becoming the voice of the voiceless. He joined the African National Congress, the ANC, and for the first time, he stood before a crowd and spoke, not like a politician, but like a human being who could no longer bear to see others suffer. His voice trembled that day, not with fear, but with feeling. He said, "We must live as equals or die as slaves." The crowd roared, not because they had found a leader, but because they had found themselves in his voice. That was the day the boy from Mvezo truly became Nelson Mandela, the man the world would come to know, but not yet understand, because the real test had only just begun. After that first speech, Mandela's name began to spread quietly through the streets of Johannesburg. People whispered about him in cafes, in crowded trains, and under the dim light of the township. He had become a symbol of hope, though hope was a dangerous thing in a country built on fear. He studied law at the University of the Witwatersrand, surrounded by people from every race and belief. It was here that he truly began to understand the power of unity. He saw that injustice was not just a black man's burden, it was humanity's wound. He defended those who had no money to pay him, fought for those who had no voice, and listened to the stories that the government wanted the world to forget. But with every step forward, the walls of apartheid grew tighter. The government declared new laws, each one colder than the last. A black man could not walk freely, could not live where he chose, could not even dream without permission. Mandela's fight was no longer about his people alone, it was about dignity itself. In 1944, he helped form the ANC Youth League, driven by one clear vision, that freedom would never be handed down, it had to be taken back. Alongside Sisulu, Oliver Tambo, and other young leaders, they began organizing strikes, boycotts, and peaceful protests. Their energy was electric, their belief unshakable. But power never surrenders quietly. The police raided meetings, arrested protesters, and filled the jails with dreamers. Still, Mandela refused to stop. He believed that even if their bodies were caged, their spirit could remain unbroken. Then came 1952, the year of the Defiance Campaign. Thousands took to the streets in open resistance. Mandela stood at the front, fearless, demanding equality. The government called him a criminal, the people called him a leader. His speeches became weapons, his words sharper than any blade. For the first time, he was banned from public gatherings. He could not be quoted, could not appear in newspapers, could not even meet more than one person at a time. But silence never stopped him. It only taught him new ways to speak. He used his law office as a shelter for the oppressed, defending workers, mothers, and students, anyone whose life had been torn apart by apartheid. By 1955, he helped create the Freedom Charter, a document that declared South Africa belongs to all who live in it. It was a dream of unity, of a nation that could breathe together. Yet, to the rulers, that dream was treason. In 1956, Mandela and more than 100 others were arrested and charged with high treason. For 5 long years, the trial dragged on. Mandela walked to court every day with calm eyes and an unbroken spirit. When he finally spoke, he said, "The struggle is my life." Those words were not written on paper. They were carved in his soul. But by the early 1960s, the struggle was changing. Peaceful protests were met with bullets, villages were burned, and families destroyed. Mandela had always believed in nonviolence until he saw that the state itself had declared war on its people. So he made a decision that would change everything. He went underground. The man who once stood in open daylight disappeared into the shadows. He learned the language of secrecy, disguises, and danger. The police called him the Black Pimpernel because he could vanish just when they thought they had him cornered. Mandela helped form Untold, the Spear of the Nation, a group that would resist through sabotage, not terror. Their goal was not blood, but attention, not destruction, but awakening. He believed that when words are forbidden, actions must speak. For months, he moved across the country, organizing resistance and training volunteers. Yet deep down, he knew the path he had chosen would lead to one of two ends: victory or prison. And he was ready for both. In 1962, his journey caught up with him. He was arrested, accused of leaving the country illegally and inciting workers to strike. During his trial, he stood tall and refused to plead for mercy. He said, "I do not deny my actions. I deny that they were crimes." He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. As the cell door closed behind him, a guard whispered that this was the end, but Mandela smiled faintly because he knew something the guard did not. This was only the beginning. Behind bars, he found a strange kind of freedom. The walls could contain his body, but not his mind. He studied, read, wrote, and taught others. He turned his cell into a classroom and his silence into a weapon. He wrote to his family, but his letters were censored. He missed his wife, Winnie, and his children deeply, yet he never allowed sadness to replace strength. 2 years later, while still serving his sentence, new charges were brought, this time far more serious. The government had discovered secret plans of sabotage, and Mandela's name was written all over them. He was taken from prison to face the Rivonia trial, a case that could end only one way: death or life imprisonment. And so, as he stood in that courtroom, the world held its breath. He looked at the judges, unafraid, and said words that would echo through history. "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." The courtroom fell silent. The world outside was shaken, and in that silence, Nelson Mandela became more than a man. He became a movement. Deep narration. The sentence was life imprisonment. No date of release, no promise of sunlight. Only a small cell on Robben Island, cold, silent, and merciless. The floor was hard, the blankets were thin, and the labor was endless. Prisoners crushed stones beneath the African sun until their hands bled white. Mandela's cell had nothing but a bucket, a mat, and a tiny window no bigger than a man's hope. Yet inside those walls, he refused to break. He woke before dawn, exercised, studied, and disciplined his mind like a soldier. He taught the younger prisoners law, history, and patience. He told them that victory was not about how long they suffered, but how long they could remain human. Guards mocked him, called him by a number instead of a name, 466/64, but Mandela wore that number like armor. He said later, "They could take everything except my dignity." Year after year, he watched the ocean crash against the island's edge, each wave whispering of freedom he could not yet touch. Letters from his wife were censored, his children grew up without him, and the world outside kept changing. Still, he never let hatred live inside him. He studied his captors, not to destroy them, but to understand them. He learned their language, Afrikaans, because he believed that real power begins when you speak to your enemy in his own tongue. He treated guards with respect, even those who spat at him. Slowly, one by one, they began to see the man behind the number. In the outside world, the struggle raged on. Protesters filled the streets, songs of defiance spread across continents. The name Nelson Mandela became a cry, a prayer, a symbol of something unbreakable. But inside Robben Island, Mandela remained calm. He said, "Change takes time. Even the greatest sea is made of small drops." After 18 long years on Robben Island, he was transferred to Pollsmoor Prison. His hair had turned gray, his eyesight weakened by years of sunlight reflected off white stones. Yet his spirit was sharper than ever. From behind bars, he began secret talks with the government. He told them that freedom could not be negotiated in fear. It had to be built on respect. It was a risk. Many of his comrades thought he was being deceived, but Mandela believed that peace was not a sign of weakness, it was the highest form of courage. In 1988, he was moved again, this time to Victor Verster Prison. The world had changed. Songs about him played on radios, posters carried his face, and the words "Free Nelson Mandela" echoed in every capital on earth. Even those who once called him a terrorist now called him a hero. Then came the morning of February 11th, 1990. The gates opened, and after 27 years of captivity, Nelson Mandela walked out, tall, calm, and smiling. His fist raised, his heart steady. He did not shout for revenge. He simply said, "I stand here before you not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you, the people." The world cheered, but his journey was not over. The real challenge had just begun, to heal a nation wounded by centuries of hate. He led negotiations that dismantled apartheid. He built bridges between enemies who once swore to destroy each other. And in 1994, Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first black president. The crowd at his inauguration wept openly as he took the oath, because the man who had spent half his life in a cell was now leading the country that once imprisoned him. As president, he chose forgiveness over vengeance. He invited his jailers to his inauguration, shook their hands, and said, "If I can forgive them, then so can you." His vision was simple yet extraordinary: to replace fear with reconciliation, anger with understanding, and division with unity. But the world rarely sees what lies behind greatness. Mandela often sat alone at night, burdened by the weight of expectations. He missed the simplicity of his prison days, the silence, the purpose, the clarity. Freedom, he realized, was not the end of the journey. It was the beginning of responsibility. After serving one term, he stepped down, proving that true leaders know when to leave. He spent his final years traveling, writing, and guiding others toward peace. When he passed away in 2013, the world fell silent, not in mourning alone, but in reflection, because Mandela had taught humanity its most painful truth, that freedom is not about breaking chains, it is about refusing to wear them again. He once said, "I am not a saint unless you think of a saint as a sinner who keeps on trying." And perhaps that is what he truly was. Not a legend carved in stone, but a man of flesh and soul who stumbled, rose, and kept walking. The boy from Mvezo, the troublemaker, the prisoner, the president, and finally, the man who proved that even in the darkest cell, the human spirit can still find light.